What is up, wizards? In this video, I'm going to be breaking down why you don't need a record label, nor do you need distribution for your music to succeed as an artist in today's music industry. And in fact, why you're probably better off if you don't even try to get those things. So if you want to follow me over to the whiteboard here, I'm going to give you a breakdown of this whole situation. And that way, you're going to understand this better than actually most record label owners understand it. So here we go. All right, so let's take a look at the old business model of the music industry, which most people, most artists, are still running on. And I will explain why this does not work for artists anymore, even though it might have like 30 years ago or so. Okay, so the first thing that happens with this whole thing is that you have obviously your artists, and they make the music, okay? But they don't know how to market this music or sell it or make really much money from it, aside from maybe trying to do that at gigs or to get paid for performance. So instead of trying to do that themselves, what they do is then they take the rights to the music and then they give that then to the label. Because the label is supposed to know how to do this marketing and selling of the music. That's their job, right? So then the label takes it and gives it to their distributor. And then the distributor in turn takes it and gives it to the stores. So that might be, we're talking online music stores here mostly. So we might be talking iTunes, Beatport, and Spotify. Okay, so that's how the whole thing is set up initially. And obviously when you have the customers coming in down here, right? Customers or consumers, they're giving dollars to the stores. So there's a bunch of things that happen here that artists often don't really understand. And they get surprised when they get a royalty check that is in just like the low dollar amounts, even cents sometimes. And so this is a big problem, I would say, and one of the reasons why this model is now completely broken and basically a terrible business model for the artist, even though it still benefits a lot of the other entities in the model. So let me explain why this is. The stores all take a cut of the dollars that the customers pay them. So iTunes, I believe, takes 30% of sales. Beatport takes about 50%. Spotify takes, I think, about 52% of the revenue generated from streams. So if you average out the cuts that these three entities alone are taking, and other download digital stores might be taking different cuts, but we're just going to look at these three for now because they're probably the most relevant ones for someone making electronic music. The average, the cut that they're taking right off the bat is 42.6%, right? So So almost half of the money that the customers are paying out is gone. It's just taken by the stores to begin with. But that's not the end of the situation. Now, the stores are going to then pay the distributor, right? And the distributor also takes a cut. And most distributors take anywhere between like 5 and 15%. Some will take more than that, but we'll just say, for the sake of argument, that the distributor takes 10% on average. These numbers could vary depending on, obviously, what distributor you're using, what stores you're going into, but the math is going to be pretty much the same regardless of what you're doing. So then the distributor, after they take their 10% cut, they then pay the label the money. And the label is going to take anywhere between, I would say, 50% to as much as 90%. If the label's doing a whole lot of marketing, they may be recouping on their marketing costs. If they're even doing that, a lot of labels don't do much marketing at all. They might have an email list that they send out for each release, but typically they're not spending very much on ads or anything like that because they're already getting cut down to half of what the sale was. So oftentimes the labels can't even afford to do marketing because they're not really making very much. So anyway, they take their 50 to 90% cut, and then that now winds up with the artist. So take a guess what, let's see, about 57.4%. Once all these entities have taken their cuts, right? So what is 50 to 90% of 90% of 57.4% or whatever, right? We're just talking about how many times this gets cut down because it's getting cut, 1, 2, 3 ways down before it hits the artist. And what you get is, I would say, depending on the situation, the artist is winding up with somewhere between 5% and probably best case scenario, 26% of revenue is what the artist actually is pocketing in this model. So that means that if you have a release that goes out, and let's say that release sells for maybe $10, you're only getting a tiny, tiny fraction. You're getting like 50 cents to maybe $2.60 out of that best case scenario. So I hope you can see why this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and no pun intended around that, but it's like crazy, right? So why do people do this? Why do artists still go with this model? What's crazy about this is it's not just artists that are suffering here, it's also labels. And distributors and stores, they're still doing pretty good. In fact, they're actually making a lot of money because they're getting a large cut. But here's the crazy part. The stores are getting paid more for the music that the artists put out than the artists are getting paid. And I don't think that makes any sense. But that's how it is. So most people do this because they just don't know any other alternative. They don't want to do their own marketing. Artists don't understand marketing. They think it's wrong or bad, or like they just hate it or something like that. I don't know. But what's the real reason why this all happens is because basically when you really look at it, what's happening is that, artists hate marketing. Most of them, at least. Not all of them. There's some really good ones. Guys like the Polish Ambassador are good at it and have marketing degrees and stuff, and they make a lot more money generally than artists that fit this, right? So what do? Because artists hate marketing and they don't understand it, they don't know what to do, they don't know the first thing about it, they're just going to a label. What's really happening when you're looking to get signed by a label so that you will have this great music career afterwards, is what you're basically just doing is outsourcing your marketing. And because you're outsourcing your marketing, now the label is going to be the one to do it. But a lot of labels don't understand marketing either, because a lot of labels were created by artists. And are the labels really doing a good job with this marketing? I don't know. I would say probably not in a lot of cases. They might have an email list, like I said, but they're not necessarily growing that list very quickly. I know from my experience working with a lot of labels that it's really not true. Most labels don't really know what they're doing with marketing. So what they're doing is they're counting on basically economy of scale. The label's only going to make money if they have a lot of releases coming out all the time, because the average release these days isn't making much. It might make like, $100 to $300, gross or so. So there's no way that a label is going to make a lot of money unless they just get a ton of artists and a ton of releases cranking out all the time. If they've got, tons and tons and tons of those, well then, yeah, maybe they'll be able to make a couple thousand, few $1,000s a month if the label really works at it and gets a large roster of artists. But the issue there is that, okay, well, even if they do have that, this number right here is getting cut in half just because of distributors and stores. With the old business model, there is actually no way that a label that's doing marketing is going to be able to profit from what's going on any sort of large scale because of what they have to do in terms of this. And they don't necessarily have to do that, but they choose to do that. So what's happening here is mainly the problem of artists hating marketing. If they understood how to market, they wouldn't need to pass it off to them, and then they pass it off to them, and then these guys pass it off to them. You have 1, 2, 3 different sets of middlemen here that are all taking a cut of the music. And the only reason why this is happening is because this model was developed so long ago when physical media was the only way to actually sell music. Back in the day, it was very, very expensive to create a record. It often cost tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You could only do it in a really high-end professional recording studio. And that was a big problem because that meant that only artists that got signed by big labels had even the chance to get their music out there. Nowadays, that's not true. We have not only less expensive music equipment that we can use to record all of our records, but we also have, on top of that, we have the internet. So here's the thing. This business model was based on all of this, and all of these different companies, they started off early on when all the big changes were happening in the music industry, and the stores came out and they're like, okay, we got the internet. Now we can sell downloads to musicians, and of course Napster happened and piracy, and people started pirating music, and all of that kind of ended up slowly chipping away at recorded music sales. And a lot of people believe that, people just don't buy music anymore and there's no money in recorded music, and that's actually not true. The latest report that was created with this actually shows that there is about $19.1 billion that was spent by consumers in 2018 on recorded music And so that includes both streaming and downloads, but even just the downloads part is still billions. And so this is important to understand, that there's still money to be had. And in fact, this industry grew last year for the first time in, I think, 10 years or something like that. So the issue, though, is that if this is what's being spent here, these guys right here are getting half of all of that. They're getting half of that nearly $20 billion that's being made off of your music, off of other artists' music every year. And the only reason they're getting that is because artists don't know how to set it up so that they can sell directly to the customer. And so they've got, 3 middlemen. And I'll tell you, this is totally unnecessary, and there's no way that an artist can make any real money on recorded music if they're going about it this way. Maybe with streaming, if they get millions of plays, they can make like a couple thousand, few $1,000s a month. But even then, that's just not very good, right? How are you gonna do that? So what does that whole situation look like that we just broke down there? Well, there's another word for it, and it's called a pyramid scheme. And it's not exactly a pyramid scheme, but it is pretty close to it. And here's kind of the issue with this. So here at the top, right, of the pyramid, you've got your stores, and then you've got your distributors, and then you have the labels, and then you have the artists. And of course, the money's all coming in here. So there are less stores than there are distributors, and there are less distributors than there are labels, and there are less labels than there are artists. And this is actually, obviously, a problem for artists, because what happens is a dollar comes in from the top, and it just gets siphoned off and it bounces around and all this stuff, and by the time it gets to one of us, then it's just cents. Maybe we get a nickel on the dollar, maybe we get a quarter on the dollar, but these people are making more from our music per sale than we are as artists. I think this is a problem. Actually, in some cases, these people are too making more, and in many cases, these people are making more from our music than we are as well. So, I don't know about you, but I am kind of done playing that game. And what I want to do is I just want to get rid of these entities in terms of my involvement with them for the most part. Nothing against record labels, nothing against Apple or Beatport, nothing against, the distributors, but we have technology now that makes this entire model totally outdated, totally irrelevant. The only reason we would need any one of these entities here is because we don't know how to do our own marketing. So let me break that down as to how we can actually cut out all of these middlemen and, as the artist, become the store. And yes, we will still have to pay some people, we're gonna be paying taxes and everything, but overall we're gonna be able to keep a much larger chunk, and we're gonna be actually in control of the growth of our own careers. Because here's the thing, even if these other entities are good at doing marketing, they're doing it for you. So as long as someone else is doing your marketing, you are not in control of your own career. You're not in control of your own business. You're not in control of your own income. So even if you hate marketing, you have to learn how to do it if you want to be in control of your business. So let's go ahead and take this whole pyramid thing. Let's reverse it. And we're going to use a classic marketing model that we call a funnel. And even though funnels have had a big revival lately, especially with the advent of certain types of software like ClickFunnels and the 2 Comma Club, and if you don't know what this stuff is, you might want to look it up. But anyway, so a funnel is basically just a way to model your marketing. So the classic way of thinking about this says that for someone to become your customer, first they have to know that you exist, then they have to like you, and then they have to trust you. And because money is just an instrument of trust, people are happy to pay you if they feel like what they're getting in return is worth more than the money that they're giving up, then you'll get their money, right? So you get the money at this point when they trust you. So up here, you've got your potential customers, right? And we're going to call them prospects. So these are people that might buy from you, but they don't know who you are yet. And so these people are out there, right? And they're spending about 20 billion a year on music services, right? Right now, about half of that money, approximately, is going to the stores, as we saw in the previous breakdown. So these people are out there, and they're on places like Facebook, right? I think Facebook has something like 2 billion. And then they're on YouTube as well, right? And then they're on Instagram. Okay, these are the biggest platforms in the world. They actually have more members of these particular organizations and companies than there are citizens of entire countries in the world. Facebook has twice as many members as there are people who live in China. So this is important to understand on the economy of scale, that no matter what kind of music you make, whether it's, mainstream pop or it's the most bizarre type of electronic music, you can find your people on one of these platforms, and probably just on Facebook. So instead of giving up your rights as an artist and giving it to a label, or starting your own label and trying to make your money on the work of other artists, you can actually do a lot better just as one artist if you cut out the middlemen and you say, okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna put an ad in front of these prospects. So let's say, they're out here, on the internet and on social media, and they see an ad. And this ad says, get 3 songs free from an artist. So anyway, they click on this ad, and then this ad in turn takes them to a page where they can put in their email address, right? And if they do that, then they get the songs delivered to them. So it'll go boom, right, into their computer inbox. And now you have an email address. So at this point, they're not just a prospect, they're actually what we would call a lead, because now we can lead the whole conversation by continuing to email them. Every time that we come out with a new album, we can send an email blast out. And if we have a bunch of these leads, then we don't have to pay every time that we are going to try and reach these people. Actually, we can, if we get a large email list, let's say of like 40,000, 50,000 people, we can command a ridiculous amount of attention for an extremely low cost. It's not nothing, but it's just, almost nothing. So once we have the lead, well, then we don't stop there. We say, okay, now that we have their email, and before, they leave this page, they say, okay, we're gonna send you your songs, but check this out. You can get the rest of the album for $7. And let's say that we can maybe get 1 out of 30 people to do that, okay? So 1 out of 30 people that gives us an email we can upsell them to an album. And then the people who buy the album and go for that, we can upsell them to maybe a $20 t-shirt, okay? And then the people who buy that, we can then upsell them. If you have a large catalog of music and you've done a number of albums, you could give them your whole collection of music for maybe like 60 bucks, right, on a flash drive. Okay? Okay, so what's happening here is basically we are in control of this situation. We're getting these ads in front of people. Most people aren't clicking on them, but the ones that are, some of those are giving us their email address, and we can then upsell the buyers, the people who are actually going to support us, to more and more value propositions so that we can monetize on that, and then we can take the money that we earn from that to pay back our ads and cycle this through. So this is where the math starts to become important, because obviously, unless you can get just enough people, right? Let's say you get 1 out of 10 people who buy the album to get a t-shirt, and then maybe another 1 out of 10 people who buy the t-shirt to go for the entire flash drive. Obviously, you are going to need a fair bit of traffic to get this whole situation to work. Okay, so let's just look at this though. So what I found is basically you've got the ability to get traffic right now on Facebook for pretty cheap. You can get an impression for about 1 cent, right? And an impression is someone sees your ad, right? Okay, so what I found is that the click-through rate of these ads, if you can get a click-through rate of somewhere between 1% and 3% of the people who see the ad to click through, okay, and they wind up there, and let's say you get maybe, for the email opt-in, you can get 1 out of 3 people to give you your email that are clicking through into the ad. At the current cost, and this is in October of 2019 that I'm making this video, I can get email addresses for anywhere between 10 cents to about $3 each, depending on how well I've calibrated my ad, what my market is, how warmed up the market is to me, how famous I am, all these other things, right? So I found that getting a purchase, and this is for emails, to get a purchase, I usually have to spend about $6 to $20 per purchase. Okay, so if we look at this and we check these numbers out, so let's say that we're getting emails somewhere in the middle of there. Let's say that we're getting emails for $1 each. Okay, so that's great. And 1 out of 30, so that means that we've got to spend $30 in ads to earn back 7. And so that means the net cost of what we're spending is $23. Now, if every time we spend $23 to get this, we keep going and we get some of these other sales, well, yes, we're going to be losing money overall, at least in terms of right away. But here's what you have to remember. In this model, you're generating 30 emails per day, okay? So in a month, that's 900 emails in a month, and that is 10,800 emails in a year. So here's where you can actually make money. Every time you generate these emails, maybe at least once a week, maybe twice a week, you send out an email blast that then makes an offer and adds value to people's lives. And what I found is that with your email list, it depends on the industry, but you can actually make somewhere between about 25 cents to 75 cents per email per blast, if you're doing it right. And that's saying you're selling about 1% of the people who you email actually go for your offers. So there's a lot of different factors here that you have to get right to make this work. But if you can get it to work so that you're just breaking even on your ad spend, then you can cycle through this whole thing over and over and over and over and over again and generate a ridiculous amount of emails. So if this is true here, if you can keep this up, and yes, it's going to end up costing you a fair bit to do this. You know, it might cost you hundreds of dollars a month to actually start making this work. And then eventually to really get it cooking, you're probably going to want to put thousands and eventually tens of thousands of dollars into ads. But as your list continues to grow, what's going to happen is you're going to get so much of these emails, right? And this is important because this is traffic you own. Right? You don't have to pay to use that traffic. You can just email those people. If you can hit these numbers, then with a email list of just 1,000 people, right, doing this for 1 month, when you send out that blast, you can make somewhere between $250 to $750 gross sales back every time that you hit your list if you're doing it right. So if you do that just 4 times a month, that's going to be $1,000 to $3,000 per month. Just from the use of the email list. And that's assuming you're putting out new music and you're not just sending the same email to them every time. You know, you gotta be creative. You gotta come up with new stuff as you're doing this. You gotta engage them. And it might be a couple of months before you start to see some regular sales from this process. But this is the model that will put you in control of your music career and actually allow you to scale up, because all you have to do is build your list. If you're selling a certain percentage of the people who are on your list consistently and your list is growing, well, guess what? Your income is going to be going up consistently. And this actually works for just about any business and is definitely the new model, because with the internet, we don't need all these distributors and labels and all the rest of this stuff. We just got to find a traffic source to get people who might be interested in our music to a page that we set up, a simple page that just asks for their email address in exchange for music to start with, and then offers them upsells with merch and all the rest of this kind of stuff, you know, t-shirts, flash drives, etc. This is the exact model that I'm using right now for myself and for my clients. And you can get some variation in how you monetize this depending on how long you've been working on finding the right audience, running different split tests, both of ads and of these pages that you're using. But this works way better than anything else that I have ever found, especially if you can get your generation of your email costs down to closer to 10 cents. Which I have achieved already in certain situations. So now I want to show you on the back end of some of this technology what I'm actually doing here. That way you can see some real world results of what is being achieved. All right, so let me show you what this whole funnel situation looks like on the implementation end, building out in the technology part of this. So as you can see, this is a page, very simple page, where people can opt in to get 3 songs from my Tears of Joy album. And this is where they would wind up after they click on the Facebook ad. So they just put their name, put their email, they click download now, and then that leads to a one-time only offer where they can get the whole album for a discounted price of $5. If they want that, they can click this green button. It takes them to an order form. And if they don't want it, they can just click this right here, and then they can download the 3 free songs. So this exact funnel, which has been changed a little bit for one of my clients, if we look into Facebook Ad Manager, we can see that this funnel, we have set this up now to a budget of $17.28 per day. We've gotten 37 purchases, and our cost per purchase is $6.33. So this is a $5 album sale. We're currently tuning this funnel, but we've only had this up for a couple of weeks. We have spent $234.28, and we have generated $185 in sales. So what this basically means is we're getting email addresses for 10 to 15 cents a piece. We have spent a net spend of about $50, and in exchange for that, we've gotten 407 email addresses. So if you do the math on that, we can get thousands of emails per month actually for just hundreds of dollars in ad spend. And of course, we can email these people every week. When we come out with a new album, we can send out a mass email blast. We're going to make our money back and way more on this whole situation, but we're just getting started. So that's kind of what it looks like in the beginning once you start to get your metrics really dialed and people are buying in and all of this stuff. So that's what it looks like on the tech side of things. Well, I hope you found that helpful. If you have, please make sure and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click that red button down there, turn on notifications, make sure that you're getting all the most recent videos, because this is going to be an incredible journey for you if you can start to implement some of this stuff. Also, I have a Facebook group. It's called Beat Wizardry, and it's where I help producers and artists of electronic music and just general music producers as well, not only get better at production, mixing and mastering, things like that, but also how to market their music effectively using techniques like the ones that I showed in this video. So thanks so much, and that's a wrap for today. We'll see you on the next one.